Welcome everyone, it's Egwin here from Beyond Systems. Today we are talking about the lower leg and all the muscles in the lower leg, how we can mobilize them, how we can build awareness in this area, and how those actions can positively affect our foot, our balance, our knee mobility, and also our knee function, and in general, our foundation. Now, this is a standalone video. However, if you want to dive more into mobility and awareness for the foot, I've recently done a separate video regarding that, and I'll put the link to this video in the description down below. Now, without any further ado, let's get started. Now, this video will feature me talking a little bit about the mechanics, so the anatomy, the basic anatomy of our lower leg, and we'll discuss how to mobilize all of those muscles, how to work them in a functional way to reduce tension that might sit in there and increase overall awareness and mobility for those regions. Before we get started right now, if you want to stay up to date with more things like this, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And other than that, let's just get right into it. Now, what we're talking about today, like I mentioned, is the lower leg. First of all, we have two main bones in the lower leg that connect our knee with our ankle and then eventually our foot. We have the tibia, which is sort of the shin bone. It runs down, it builds the main part, the main lower part of the knee, so where the femur, your thigh bone, goes into the tibia builds this plateau where my thigh bone rests on. And then the tibia also builds the inside ankle, the tip of the inside ankle here. Then it connects to the talus, and then wire a lot of ligaments down into the rest of the foot. The second bone is actually here on the outside. And when you go into your knee crease, exactly into the joint, then you'll find, all right, there is one bone that builds sort of the second base for my knee joint. And then when you slip a little bit further to the outside, you'll find this small nubble, and that's the tip of the fibula. The fibula is the second bone in my lower leg, and it runs all the way down here. It's a very thin bone, and it builds the outside tip of my ankle here, so the malleolus lateralis. Very important, we have those two bones, and there is a functional reason for that, obviously. What's important in order to understand the function of those bones and also the muscles in the lower leg and why it's important to work on those areas in a mobilizing way is the following. Imagine this is one of the bones, say this is my fibula, this is my tibia. Now, what we have between those bones is similar to what we have between radius and ulnar, the two bones in our forearm. We have this down here as well, and it's called an interosseous membrane. It's basically a tight connective tissue that fans out between those two bones, connecting them functionally quite tightly. Now, for today's video, we won't go into exact details like fiber direction and stuff like that, but just know that there is a connective tissue layer, quite a tight one, that connects those two bones for transmitting biomechanical forces, but it also serves as an origin point for some of the muscles in the lower leg. That being said, let's jump right into which muscles we have down here. Now, basically, a muscle is always a functional unit in the body that crosses at least one joint in order to influence this joint in terms of movement. So what we have when we are talking about a joint and a muscle, the muscle produces movement through the tendon. The muscle is connected through a tendon to the bone and then moves at least one joint. Most of the muscles that we have in the lower leg, they do not just affect one joint, but they affect multiple joints. Like all my calf muscles back here, not all of them, but the big calf muscles, like the gastrocnemius muscle, for example, that one affects the knee in terms of it bends the knee, but it also extends, plantar flexes my lower foot. So this is important to understand. All the muscles that we have in front here that are running down towards my foot, they cross over multiple joints down here in my foot. Some of them extend the toes or flex the toes. Some of them supinate or pronate the foot. Some of them dorsiflex and plantar flex the foot. So dorsiflex is pulling it up like this. Plantar flexing is pointing it down. And that's what we are working with right now. Now, let's take a look at isolating some of those muscles here in our shin area. First of all, we identify this shin bone, right? The tibia, which is this, from the tip of this bone, we have our kneecap here, and underneath the kneecap, the bone that is connected with the lower leg, that's the part of the tibia from where we trace it down all the way to the lower leg, and then eventually out to the inside ankle. Now, when we trace it down with your fingers, you'll realize there is a muscular belly just on the outside of it. That's the tibialis anterior muscle. The tibialis anterior muscle is a muscle that partially supinates the foot, so it lifts the inside edge of the foot up, and it also dorsiflexes the foot, so it pulls the foot up like this. Or if we are standing on that foot, it pulls the lower leg forward like this. The next muscle that we have, now we trace the tibia down here, and now find your fibula, this knob on the outside that runs down to the outside ankle. It's a little bit more difficult to actually find your fibula because it's covered in muscle pretty nicely. And between your fibula and your tibia, when you just slide a little bit to the inside of the fibula, now you have this big muscular belly here. But this is not just the tibialis anterior muscle. It is also the extensor digitorum longus and the extensor hallucis longus. So the extensor muscle for the toes that pull the toes up like this. Up like this. So those muscles, they are also here between my fibula and my tibia. So the first from the tibia edge to the outside is the tibialis anterior, then comes the extensor hallucis longus, and then the extensor digitorum longus, and they sit, all of them sit here. Now what's important here is this. Those muscles, they fill the space between those two bones out quite a lot. Now again, go back to what we talked about before, and remember, we have two bones, and connecting those, we have this interosseous membrane. So this creates sort of a space, but a space where the muscles are actually built in, and they are bordered from all sides. Like when we take a look at a biceps, the biceps only has bone on one side. The rest of the biceps is free on the side and on top of it. And that's different for those muscles. This is one of the reasons why it's so important to work those muscles. Because every single time when a muscle originates from quite a large area, and in this case, down here, the muscle originates from the whole outside edge of the tibia and parts of the interosseous membrane and then runs down. So this means that the muscle fibers are relatively short, so that muscle cannot contract as much in terms of movement range as a biceps, for instance, can. Different type of muscle. But it's very strong. But it also means that because of that, because of this bordering in and a limited range of motion, which is natural in this area, there is also less amount of pulsation that is created by using this muscle. So those are typically also areas where stagnation of blood, of lymph flow occurs, and that can eventually lead to problems. Also, when it comes down to roughage, to toxins that are stored from metabolic functions in the body, like you were sick at one point maybe, and then metabolic waste from the immune response isn't completely flushed out. If there is something that stays back in the body, then more often than not, it stays back in regions that do not have a proper pulsation, a proper movement to them. And this area between those two bones, the fibula on the outside and the tibia on the inside, this is one of those areas where this can occur, which is why it's so important to work those. And I'm going to show you this in a second. There is only two more muscles that I want to talk to you about, which is another very important reason. You'll see in a second that has to do a lot with our foot and the function of our foot down here. And that's the fibularis longus and the fibularis brevis, also peroneus muscles, the peroneus group. It's a double name, basically. And those are wrapped around my fibula and they run out on the outside here. So the reason why you cannot directly grab the fibula as good as you can the shin bone is because it's covered in this fibularis longus and brevis. Now, those two muscles are the strongest pronator muscles, so pulling the outside edge of the foot up. And what's very, very important here is that the fibularis longus also transverses the foot on the sole of the foot down here. So this muscle partially is responsible for creating the transversal arch of the foot. Now, for some of you, you might find that there is not a lot of movement between your fibula and your tibia, or your fibula and your lower foot here, so the talus, the calcaneus, and all those other center bones in the foot here. Now, this is a problem, or this can become a problem. When I talk about movement in this bone, I do not mean it has to move as much as a knee joint. That's not what those two bones are built for, but they should be able to slightly shift against each other in order to transmit biomechanical forces properly. Also, mobility for things like a squat, like this, where you can shift your foot forward and backward, also has to do with how good the fibula articulates down here in the lower joints. The fun thing about this is it's not just a matter of connective tissue. It is partially, but it is also a matter of sometimes tight muscles. Muscles in this area can become tight partially because of all of that roughage or tension that is stored in there, toxins that potentially are in there, and this reduced pulsation, which is why we're gonna work them. Which is why we are going to work them right now with one of those balls. Now, when you take a look at the tibia, now we're gonna touch the tibia here with one hand, just relatively close to the knee. So here is my kneecap. This is this massive bony protrusion where the tibia starts, and we're gonna bring the fingers just underneath that. Now take the fingers of the other hand and just bring them out to the side a tiny little bit until use pressure until you feel, they sort of fall into the next groove. Fingers here, just on the outside edge of the tibia. Roll over the first muscle belly until you feel the fingers fall into this first groove. And now work those fingers down, up and down. Stay in the grooves. And the further down you go, the more the fingers will come together, because down here it's not so much muscle anymore, it's only the tendons that connect those muscles to the bone. Now, you can also use the ball for it, but I suggest to start with the fingers. Once you've done this, you can also play with different positions of your lower leg. So, start with a position where your foot is plantar flexed. So the toes and the ball of the foot are extended. Now try to dig the fingers in here and find this first groove and work it down. Always from the body center downward. You can move a little bit back and forth, but the main direction should be down. Now change this and pull the ball of the foot up as much as possible. Now you'll realize, whoa, hang on. Now it's really difficult to dig the fingers in. That's because the tibialis anterior muscle is now engaged. But it will give you a better idea where the tibialis anterior muscle that is important for this dorsiflexion actually is. And it will slightly protrude forward, helping you to work between it and the extensor digitorum muscles. Awesome. Then relax a little bit. Now use the ball in this groove between the first fleshy part and the outside, the fibula here. Now out here we have the fibularis longus and brevis, so the peroneus group. And in the middle, but slightly deeper in, we have those extensor digitorum, the extensor muscles for my toes. Now use the ball, again, in a forward-backwards rolling motion, but the general direction is from top down. Start in a foot is relaxed state. And then again, play with extending the foot and rubbing down the same area. And then play again with pulling the foot in, and now even extending the toes up like this, which will engage, obviously, the extensor digitorum and extensor hallucis longus muscles, featuring a little more resistance when you work in here with the ball. All of that is designed, and then shake it out a little bit. All of that is designed to mobilize this area, to get more blood flowing, to get more lymphatic flow, just to get this thing going. Now you can also use your fingers on the outside here around your fibula and work your way all the way down the fibula on the front and in the back of the fibula, and massage the peroneus group of the muscles down. Now you can play with supination, so meaning pulling the outside edge of the foot up towards my hip or my knee. And when you do this, those muscles will engage. So, whoop, rolling it up like this, those muscles will engage, and it will be a lot harder to massage them. But it will also give you more awareness of, hang on, okay, I'm doing this, this group engages. I'm doing this, this group engages. That's very, very important. And that's what this is all about. All right, now let's jump to the next area. The next area in this specific case being our back of the leg. The back of the leg, we have again a rather superficial, big muscle group, which is called the triceps surae. And then we have deeper muscles. Let's start with the superficial areas. The superficial areas, the triceps surae, is sort of a combined name for three big muscles. It's the gastrocnemius muscle right on the outside. It's a two-bellied muscle that also crosses the knee and flexes the knee. Then we have the soleus muscle, which is one big muscle underneath that attaches to the back here. And then we also have as a third one the plantaris muscle. And the plantaris muscle comes from the outside here, crosses the knee. It also goes across the knee, so over two main joints, knee and ankle, and then inserts down there together with the Achilles tendon. The Achilles tendon is formed out of those big muscles back there, of those three big muscles. And the main function of those is to push the ball of the foot down, to lift the heel up like this. Obviously, when we stand on our feet, it's this movement, this lifting the heel off the ground. That's what all of those big muscles in the back are responsible for. To work those, best way, again, is to use a ball or a fascia roll or some sort of black roll, whatever the names of those foam roller thingies are. You can work them again first with your hands to get an understanding and an idea. So grab those muscles, bring your thumbs just underneath your knee crease, in the middle, and wiggle them around a little bit until you feel, okay, I got the left and the right part of the muscle. Then use your fingers on either side and massage the muscle downward. Again, starting in a pretty much neutral position with your foot. And then go all the way into your Achilles tendon. Then do this again, but this time by actively pressing the ball of the foot down, like this. You'll see that this, in a non-weight-bearing situation, won't do a lot to those big muscles. They only engage properly if you actually stand on them. And that's what we are going to do. Constantly lose my microphone here because I'm sitting on it. All right. So you're going to grab behind here again, like this, just behind the knee. Pull the heel up a little bit from the ground, like this. Whoop. And now massage this muscle downward. Then switch to the ball. Bring the ball also just a tiny little bit underneath your knee, not exactly in the knee crease, just a tiny little bit underneath the knee, so that you feel, the ball is between those two massive muscular lumps back there. And now, one leg is pulled in a little bit. You can use your hands to push your hip up a little bit so that more weight is resting on this front leg, and you massage centerline the ball down on your foot, on your lower leg, towards the foot, sorry. Do this in a relaxed state first, again, with the ball starting up here, going all the way down. Then, repeat this whole process in a fully plantar flexed state, so extending the foot down like this. Again, rolling over. Really, imagine as if you're trying to have a nice extended foot like a ballet dancer and massage all the way down towards your heel. All right, so this is what you can easily do with the ball here. Now we can also use a foam roller like this. Just place it a little bit underneath the knee and then roll all the way down towards the ankle. Do this a couple of times. I'm gonna talk about repetition number and stuff like that afterwards. Especially if you want to work the bigger muscle groups back here, just using the ball might not be enough. So you can use, like I said, something with a bigger surface area like a foam roller. It doesn't have to be such a long one. That's actually more for the full body. And using the ball, you work a lot deeper into the structure. And that brings me to the next muscle groups. Now, back here, like I said, this triceps surae, plantaris, soleus, and gastrocnemius muscle combined, that's sort of the outside layer. Then the next layer deeper in is the popliteus muscle, which is back here, runs just across the knee, flexes the knee and helps with internal rotation of the lower leg, just a very short muscle. Then we also have the flexors of my toes, the flexor hallucis longus, the flexor digitorum longus. Hallucis is obviously the big toe, and then we have the digits, the four other digits, the four other toes, which is the flexor digitorum longus. And we have the tibialis posterior muscle. Now here is what's important to understand. All of those muscles in my lower leg, those are the so-called extrinsic muscles for my foot. There are also muscles down here directly in the foot, very short ones. Those are the intrinsic foot muscles that have to do with adjusting the foot to the ground and so on. But the extrinsic muscles, they are there to connect the lower leg, aka the rest of the body, with the foot and functionally combine balance of the foot down towards the ground with mobility and function that goes further up towards the knee in walking on uneven ground, in balancing, in running, in all of those actions. So this is why it's so important to work on those muscles and on building awareness for those muscle groups here as well. When we go into this deeper layer on the back side, what's very important to understand, the tibialis posterior muscle is sort of the middle muscle. The middle muscle between all the others that are back there. So it's really pretty much center line down, plus minus a little bit. It is responsible for plantar flexion as well, but it also supinates the foot. So again, pulls the inside edge of the foot slightly up. And here comes the funny part, it also partially originates from the interosseous membrane between my two bones. So we have muscles attached to that interosseous membrane in front and in the rear. Using front and back muscles in a proper agonist-antagonistic way also creates pull and push on this interosseous membrane, and all connective tissue in the body has a high water content, which is important for the health of this structure and its ability to stay a load-bearing, or better, load-transmitting structure. Now, I don't know if you've ever sprained your ankle really bad and you went to the OR or to the emergency room at least, or to the doctors to check it out. You might have realized that what we do at first is we check the calcaneus. Is something broken down here? We check for internal and external rotation, supination, pronation, invasion and evasion, as we also call it. We check for plantar flexion and dorsiflexion in the foot. But what you might not even have realized is that your doctor might also grab the leg up here and press together just a tiny little bit. That's checking the high fibula. Because sometimes if the foot gets cranked really bad down there, and if the structures are either tight or the force was simply too great, sometimes the fibula tends to break up here because forces in the interosseous membrane are transmitted upwards. Now, like I said earlier, having good mobility yet still stability in all of those tiny joints, in all of those areas in my lower leg is really important. Lower leg and foot is really important. Also to balance out when you walk around, also to balance out when you stumble and stuff like that. And this is also something, the more aware you are of those areas, consciously and subconsciously aware. Because we are always talking about being aware of a certain type of structure. Being aware doesn't only refer to this structure being consciously in the forefront of your mind at all times. Being aware also means that the muscles are not completely tensed. Picture it like that. If this is the full capability of a muscle from full relaxation down here to maximum tension up here, and your muscle is constantly at a very high tension level already, like here, now the capacity of this muscle to adapt to outside influences lies only in this range, because the baseline is sort of shifted upwards. However, if you manage to relax the muscle, if you have the conscious capacity or subconscious capacity to actually relax the muscle to its fullest, and it is used only in that amount of tension and force range that is necessary to do a certain type of movement, then much more adaptability is present in the structure, also on a subconscious level. You will be much more able to balance out, to react quickly, and to make use of your reflexes in a proper way when the muscle is in a proper functioning state. That's why we are doing all of those exercises. Now, coming back to the back side here, there is only one exercise left that I want to show you for now, which is, again, working with the ball, but this time we work with crunched toes and with totally extended toes. It's pretty much the same exercise than before, but now we want to really work on those deeper muscles that have to do with plantar flexion, like the tibialis posterior, and that also have to do with crunching the toes, like making a fist sort of with your toes, which is the flexors of the toes. So again, use the ball, place it back here, slightly on the outside this time, further towards the outside than the inside. Again, use the second foot just back here if you want. You can also rest it down here. I prefer to have it up here. And now roll down with the ball again. But this time we're gonna use the toes. First, you're gonna just roll over this structure without any engagement of the toes whatsoever. Now we change the game. We're gonna crunch the toes as much as possible. And again, you're gonna roll over this structure. And especially in the upper third portion of your lower leg, you're pretty much in a state of higher tension. You feel the ball is actually hurting a little bit more, digging deeper in. And now we try the same thing again with extended toes. extending the toes like this means that the muscle now is not activated, but it is still tensed, but in a stretched way. It's not tensed in terms of contraction. It is tense because it is stretched, it is elongated, because it's the antagonistic muscle to this movement. Now I roll over and, oh yeah, okay, that's again a totally different feel for how the ball rolls over the back of my foot there. All right, now let's leave it like that for now. There would be a lot more to go into more detail, but this video is already so long. When I do these exercises, don't just roll over or use your fingers to work through a muscle once. Repeat it a couple of times, at least 2, 3, 4 times per muscle and per technique. Also, obviously, I'm only showing it right now on one leg, but obviously also switch legs. So do it on one side, then do it on the other side. You're more likely than not to actually encounter differences between the left side and the right side. That's totally normal. That's to be expected, actually. All right. Next thing I'm going to show you still regarding those muscles is working a little bit with blocks, or you can also use stairs or a book or something like that. We're mainly going to use the blocks in order to increase range of motion for the movement. We could also do it completely without blocks, just from a neutral position of the foot, but you'll understand in a second. One more thing before we get properly started with the blocks, you could either use the blocks or the wall for this, is the following. Do not immediately after the work that I've just shown you stretch your gastrocnemius muscle and work it with the blocks. I'm showing it now in one video because it sort of all relates to this same zone. But do not work the muscles this deeply and open them up and then go into a full weighted situation. Give yourself a little bit of time in between, half an hour of normal walking, normal action in between, or do it on separate days. And also when it comes to stretching, especially those muscles back here, be very aware of the fact that stretching, especially your calf muscles, is not the best idea in the way most people are doing it. So when we look at, for instance, Australia, in the national ballet schools, they do not have those calf stretching blocks anymore. They removed those because they figured out that stretching calves immediately after or even before workouts actually creates more probability of injuring your Achilles tendon. So stretching the calf is something that you should do, but not with full power and not for prolonged periods of time. Prolonged periods of time would be like standing there for 1 or 2 minutes after you just finished a run. You're talking with a friend and you're in such a position, sort of stretching your rear calf here, maybe even bouncing a little bit or something like that, and staying in this position while you're talking with your friend. Don't do that. When you stretch your calf, stretch it for, say, 10, 15 seconds at the most, and do it in a way where you can control the amount of pressure you put in there very, very precisely. One of the possibilities is you can either use blocks or you could also use the wall, just like this. I'm going to use the blocks because it's a better angle for the camera right now. So you place your heel closer to the blocks, the ball of the foot is elevated. You're sort of sitting back a little bit, rear leg is bent, and from here you slowly, the front knee is extended, but not hyperextended. So from here, you slowly move your weight over towards the toes and forward until you feel this stretch back here. This allows you to fine-tune quite a lot how much tension you actually want to have in this area. All right, all that being said, now the second part of the video, I'm going to show you from different sides. I have two blocks next to each other, and the first thing we're going to do is the following. Place the balls of the feet onto the blocks like this. And now start walking like this. The ball stays on the foot, the ball stays on the block. See, the heel lifts off the ground. This is why I'm using the block to start in a more plantar flexed state. And very important for you, I'll show you from different perspective, do not shift your weight to the left and to the right. So from here, see, I'm not shifting my weight from one side to the other. My center stays exactly in between my legs, my center of gravity. So the reason why I'm doing this is because if I want my center to stay between my legs, I actually have to push down into the block with the knee that is bent and with the foot that is bent. Why are we doing this exercise? I'm going to show you a different angle again. See, when I do this, I engage my triceps suram muscle, parts of which bend the knee and extend or plantar flex my ankle, which is important because that's exactly the mechanics that you should use while walking. Extending the ankle and at the same time flexing the knee, priming the movement forward. If you're not having this mechanics in your leg properly, you're most likely using more of your hip flexor muscles to actually lift the leg and place it forward than you are using your calf muscles to prime the knee forward. Using too much of the hip flexor in this state actually creates more tension in the hip area and more pressure in the lumbar spine, also limiting movement upward in the body, thus making it a more stiff, again, much more limited and inefficient way of locomotion forward. So that's an interesting exercise to do. So once more, lifting the heel up, whoop. And again, the center of your body stays in the middle. You could also do it without blocks. I'm using the blocks to increase range of motion, like I said earlier. The next thing you can play with to get more engagement of those muscles going is stand there with your feet, and then from here, simply pushing up onto your tiptoes. And now try to lift the toes off the ground, balancing only on the balls of the feet. Pushing up, extend the toes up. Dorsiflexed toes. Whoop. Lifting the toes off the ground, trying to balance, and come back down again. Shake it out a little bit. And one more time. And only this time, you're going to dig the toes in. You're going to spread the toes out on the ground when you do it. So press down into the ball of the foot and press the toes down into the ground, really digging in. Whoop. Really digging into the ground. And while you're doing those two variations, be very aware of which muscles in the lower leg are engaged to help you balance, to stabilize in this posture. All right. Now, all of that being said, there are a lot more exercises, but like I said, this video is already quite long, so I'm going to cut it here. And if there are questions, then I can post more about those things in the future. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment box down below. In terms of training those things, especially those last couple of exercises with the blocks and with this balancing action, I would do those either before you use the balls or the foam roller to work your lower legs, or your fingers to work the lower legs, or do that on a separate day. All of those things that we just did, they are there for you. You don't have to remember all the names of the muscles or anything like that. But what you should be aware of is, oh, hang on, okay, when I just flex my toes, which muscle in my lower leg do I feel engages and which ones doesn't? Which muscles get elongated? In what situation are which muscles working? That's really important. Not so much to be conscious about it in any given moment, like I mentioned earlier, but just to have the capacity to perceive it. And once you retrain that, your balance improves drastically, your ability to be more connected with the surface you're walking on, especially when it is on uneven ground. You're much more aware of your foundation, everything literally from your belly downward, and you're more connected in the present moment in that very situation, which will give you biomechanically as well as psychologically much more stability, much more self-confidence, much more grounding, much more present self, and also reduces the risk of injury and gives you more adaptability in any given moment. All right, thanks a lot for watching. If you know someone who needs this information or you think might be interested in that, please go ahead and share this video. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date for more info, and check out the link I put in the description down below of the video where I'm talking about mobility and awareness for the foot. There is a little less anatomy lesson in there and more exercise focus, but with all of those different muscles, it's just important to mention them to give you an idea of how much is actually going on in those areas. All right, have a wonderful time. Thank you for watching and see you around soon. Bye, guys.